Welcome everyone to time number 2 for the workshop on climate income and redirecting financial flows, hosted by Citizens Climate International. This is our agenda. I am welcoming you, and so will Joseph Robertson shortly. Before we get there, we will discuss the learning outcomes for today. I'll present a short video about climate income, also known as carbon fee and dividend. Then Joe will give opening comments. And Joe, if your sound's not good this time around, we will stop you and make you start over a lot sooner than last time. Uh, we will then review global cooperation via Climate Interactive Sea Roads. We will play a climate game on Kahoot, and it's only for 25 players, and it'll include discussion. And then we'll do a short review of some of those answers using Climate Interactive's En-ROADS Policy Simulator, do a little bit of an exploration of the Climate Income and Redirecting Financial Flows website, and then we'll put you into breakout rooms to formulate questions you may have, and then we'll have a Q&A, followed by a group photo. So our learning outcomes for today are to learn about climate income, also known as carbon fee and dividend, carbon border adjustment mechanisms, carbon pricing, and redirecting financial flows. Key to understand today is that you don't need to become an expert. Instead, you'll become a messenger of expert information to your politicians and communities. So this video was produced about a decade ago, and it's quite relevant. This is the Canadian version, and it's about carbon fee and dividend, also known as climate income. And it's 3 minutes, and I hope you enjoy it.
The climate is changing. Extreme weather is disrupting livelihoods and food supplies around the world. This is observed. This is documented. This is the scientific community's consensus. The climate is changing. Carbon emissions are driving that change. Emissions come from burning fossil fuels. So if we want to slow or even reverse the change, we must lower our fossil fuel use. By charging a fee on fossil fuels and returning that revenue to households as a dividend, we can do just that, starting a chain of positive effects. Fossil fuels become less desirable. Cleaner sources of energy become more competitive. The dividend creates millions of jobs. Carbon emissions go down. Reduced air pollution saves tens of thousands of lives. And climate change is brought under control. We can make this happen. But enacting a carbon fee and dividend isn't in our hands, it's in theirs. How do we sway them? What can we do? We can use our voices to express political will and demand action. We must help our elected leaders work together. It's on us to tell them what we want as a group. Because when voices call out together, their impact multiplies. The government can respond to the will of the people, provided we tell the government what we want. And what we want is a livable world. This is what Citizens Climate Lobby works for, to empower citizens to connect with and influence their members of parliament, to spread the idea that each one of us can address climate change. Bring your voice to citizensclimatelobby.ca.
Yes, that's the Canadian version, and we did bring our voices to Parliament Hill, and we did get what we lobbied for. Canada has a carbon fee and dividend, also known as climate income policy. So now I will hand the microphone over to our executive director at Citizens Climate International, Joseph Robertson. It's in your hands, Joe. Joe? Joe? Oh, that's why he wasn't. Now you should be able to turn on your microphone, Joe. Sorry about that.
There we go. Thank you, Kathy, so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound much better this time around. Great.
Great. Welcome, everyone. And let me first say thank you. Thank you for signing up to do this challenging work to pursue change that could take generations. You know the stakes: millions of lives lost or saved, dozens of countries failing or succeeding, proliferating global chaos, or a future of shared sustainable human thriving in harmony with nature. This is a generational moment. Future generations will look back on what we chose to do at this moment in history, and they will know the costs and the consequences of our choices. Already, we see food systems under extreme stress. Dozens of countries face unsustainable debt that will only worsen with climate impacts. Critical stabilizing structures of Earth's climate system are in danger of being lost. We cannot afford to keep investing in destruction. Next week, the community of nations will gather at the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. They will be negotiating our climate future, whether they see it that way or not. A few weeks later, the world will gather in Bonn, Germany, for mid-year climate negotiations. In September, the United Nations Summit of the Future will advance sustainable development, managed response to global shocks, a new agenda for peace, and a global financial system that works for all. There are many opportunities this year for major progress, but too often governments look to other nations to lead. We all need to ask our governments to lead. Instead of incentivizing pollution, we need to incentivize innovation that avoids pollution. Climate income is leverage to lead. Put a fee on pollution, return all revenues to the people, steadily increase both the fee and rebates so more money goes into people's pockets while polluters feel direct cost pressure to evolve better business models and stop polluting. We signed up to make change that will take generations. Climate income is an economic engine that allows governments to serve their people with vision and honor while shaping a better future for all. Your steady future building engagement is how they will find their way to that better choice.
Beautiful, Joe. Thank you so much. So you now should all be able to unmute yourselves. And if you have any comments for Joe before he leaves, feel free to just turn on your microphone and say something. Otherwise, we will continue. Any comments you'd like to share, please go ahead.
Joe, this is KB. I'm curious about this, whatever got passed that is blocking our ability to do a carbon fee in Congress. Can you talk about that?
And say one word about that. So there was a resolution passed in the House of Representatives that, in theory, opposes passing any kind of carbon tax. The reality is Congress does not have authority to revoke its own taxation authority. It's a messaging bill, as they say. And the good news is that every time that bill has been introduced, there are fewer Republican votes for it, and the bipartisan vote is less than the last time, and that's true again this time. It barely passed compared to other times, so there's nothing stopping Congress from passing it.
Great question and great answer. Thanks so much, Joe, for being here. And what we're going to do now is explore C-Roads. C-Roads is also from Climate Interactive. I don't know if you've explored En-ROADS, and what it allows us to do is look at global cooperation. We can look at 6 major regions of the world and their contributions to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The United States, the European Union, other developed nations, China, India, and other developing nations. And what we know from the AR6 IPCC report, or the 6th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that was released in 2023, is that the world must reduce greenhouse gas emissions at the following rate. It must peak in 2025 and begin to go down at a rate at 8% per year. So we all live in different countries around the world, and I'm sure you've heard, what about this country? Like, why does my country have to do it? So what whataboutisms have you heard about climate change? Like, what countries have come up when people said, well, even if we did all that, this country will make it, you know, will is the problem. So what whataboutisms have you heard? What countries? Don't be shy. Just shout it out or put it in the chat.
The US and China.
Okay, let's start with those two. Okay, so everybody is expected to peak their greenhouse gas emissions in 2025, start having them begin to reduce at 8% per year in 2025. We're at 3.3 degrees Celsius. And you can see red will be the United States. And if they did what they're supposed to do, temperatures will go down by 0.1. So then let's go to China, have them do their fair share, peak in 2025, begin to reduce in 2025, and go down at 8% per year. So we started at 3.3. US did their fair share. Now we're adding China to the list. And it brings it down another 0.4 degrees. So, okay, what other countries have you heard or are interested in knowing what their contribution is to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in a fair way? You can just shout it out or put it in the chat. India. Okay, fantastic. So India, the most populous country in the world, I think. The emissions would peak in 2025. And like the rest of the world, if they were to do their fair share, they'd be going down at 8% a year to get us 40% below 2005 levels by 2030. We're at 2.7 now, after having first the United States decrease it by 0.1 degrees and China by 0.4. So let's see what happens when India contributes. And here we go, I'll hit enter. And it's only 0.1 degrees. The average person living on the subcontinent of India has a much lower carbon footprint than most of us, so they don't have much reducing to do compared to some other countries, but still they contribute, and every greenhouse gas matters. Does anyone want to say another one?
Yes, European EU.
The EU. Okay, so the EU, it's been working hard at this for a long time. They have some of the best environmental laws on the planet. And although none of us are doing enough, that's for sure, except for maybe Costa Rica and India and a couple other countries, Morocco. I can't think of any others, but I think there's a couple more. So in the European Union was to, do like the United States, China, and India, decrease their emissions at 8% per year, it would still only shave 0.1 degrees.
Other developing nations?
Other developing nations. Let's make sure we know what that is. So that is other than China and India. This includes all of the continent of Africa, Central and South America, South and Southeast Asia, and most of the Middle East and the small island nations. So if they were doing their part, and mind you, this is 150 countries, so watch what happens when they do their part. It goes down like 5.5 degrees. So it's really important to help developing nations leapfrog over the fossil fuel era. And last but not least, we'll do all the other developed nations. That includes Canada, Iceland, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Norway, Russia, South Korea, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and other former USSR republics. So if we all work together and do our fair share, we can get our planet on track for a livable world. Any questions or comments about the C roads before we continue?
Okay.
It's okay.
A question?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Generally, the developing nation will say that they share, of decreasing the emission, but at a lesser rate, at a lower rate than the developed nation. What do you say about that?
There are two things there. One, I often read from polling that almost all people in almost all countries want to do their fair share, regardless of whether or not they are the cause behind that. That being said, there is this concept in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change called common but differentiated responsibilities. So in fact, it is expected that countries like the European Union and most developed nations should be reducing at a much faster rate than developing nations. And that should be our goal. And we should be creating mechanisms also to help developing nations leapfrog over the fossil fuel era, because if we don't, we're just not going to reach the 1.5C planet.
Yes.
Yes, great. Great question. Any other questions? So next, what we're going to do is play a game. So there's this game, it's called Kahoot, and only 25 people can play, but I find most people don't want to. But I'd love to get a few people playing because it's a lot of fun. If you're going to play, you have to open up another screen. So you're gonna have to open a screen separate from Zoom. Do not watch the Zoom screen. And then when the answers come up, you have to sometimes memorize what the color of your answer is. Is it the red triangle, or I'm sorry, or the blue square, or the yellow circle, or the green? Sorry, whatever. You get what I mean. And points, you get points for correct answers and how fast you get that correct answer. And you have 20 seconds to answer each question. www.kahootit. And you enter in the PIN 63960. We'll take a couple minutes for people to sign in. So please do sign in. It's a lot of fun. When this slows down, oh, lots of people are playing. This is fantastic. So it's how fast you answer and your correct answer. We're going to get started. Does anybody want to sign before I start? Last chances. Okay, here we go. So first it's going to give the title, and then it's going to give you the first question. Burning fossil fuels accounts for how much greenhouse gases in the past decade? And press on the correct answer, 25, 45, 65, or 85. You have 11 more seconds.
Jag tänkte, jag såg inte svaren. Det borde ha syntes.
Hey. So the correct answer is 85%. Congratulations to all who got that. Great. And that's why we focus a lot on fossil fuels at Citizens Climate International. In fact, that is the majority of our focus. Yes, we do speak of food as well because it's interconnected, and but fossil fuels is a huge chunk of our focus. But we see all the interconnections. So ready for the next question? Here we go. And oh, congratulations, HP, you're in the lead. Common but differentiated responsibilities are under consideration of the European Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanisms. True or false? So the answer is true. Yes, it is being under consideration. And we just had a meeting with the WTO a couple of weeks ago. And yes, this was part of our discussion. And that's why it is so important to have our colleagues from the global south at the table, because we have to make sure all these mechanisms that we're designing to get our economies off of fossil fuels doesn't punish anybody, or we find ways to make sure that they're not punishing. We have to keep talking. Oh, okay. This is Lurker's now in the lead. Okay. Look at the graph that's going to show up, but the richest 1% are responsible for more than 2 times as much carbon pollution as the bottom of 3.1 billion. So look at that graph and tell me if it's true or false.
False.
Yes, it's true. Usually when you get that specific in a Kahoot answer, it's true. But even the graph shows you that. And that's why with climate income,
Unfavorable.
a carbon fee and dividend policy that we advocate for, most people come out ahead. And that's because the richest amongst us have a much higher carbon footprint, and that tends to make it so that the bottom maybe 80%, at least in Canada, come out ahead. Lurker's in the lead. Keep going, Lurker. Good work. Okay, true or false? Citizens Climate International trains and supports people who relay expert information to politicians and the public. True or false? Don't even need to explain that one. That's the key of what we do, is we help you become excellent messengers of expert information. And Lurker is in the lead, but there's people on their on his or her or their tails, so it's not over yet with 4 questions left to go. Okay, maximizing tree planting globally will dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. True or false? And the key word is dramatically. It is false. Planting is really important because for biodiversity, for culture, for local temperatures, for adaptation, definitely for food. Where I live, a lot of people where I live in Canada rely on hunting for their sources of winter meat, especially. So yeah, it's important for that. But because fossil fuels are the primary source of greenhouse gases, all the tree planting in the world will barely reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we will explore that after this game on En-ROADS. So we'll go to the next question. And Lurker is still in the lead. Good job, Lurker. Okay, the keyword is drastically. Subsidizing clean energy will drastically reduce greenhouse gases. Will it drastically do that? Okay. And the answer, false. No, it will not. Again, we need to make polluters pay. The major source of greenhouse gas are coming from fossil fuels. And yes, it's great to subsidize clean energy, and it will be really important in a lot of specific circumstances. But if not done correctly, it will subsidize the energy intensive habits of the rich, but it also doesn't make polluters pay. So therefore, it doesn't have that potential to really decrease emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. If governments choose to subsidize their way out of the climate crisis, they risk a debt crisis. So if governments want to subsidize all those clean energies and all the things for all the households and everything, that's basically making the taxpayer pay for all of these things, as opposed to letting the financial system do some self-correcting. They risk a debt crisis. And the answer is true. It's true. They risk a debt crisis, and you can Google the IMF and climate crisis and debt crisis, and you can find out more information. And it is very difficult to achieve the 1.5C aspiration without putting a price on pollution. The answer is true. It's very difficult to achieve the 1.5C aspiration without making polluters pay. So to explore this data, we will go to En-ROADS Policy Simulator. So En-ROADS comes from Climate Interactive. It's, you can research it, but it's a high caliber policy simulator. And we'll answer a few of these questions. So yes, tree planting is very important. But if we maximizing tree planting to the end of the century, it'll only take the temperatures down 0.1 degrees. And if you weren't following what I did, I just pulled this lever on afforestation all the way over to the right. We can also protect the many great forests of the world. from logging and other things, and with proper management. And there's many reasons to protect our forests. They are so important for culture, for indigenous peoples, for people who live close to the land, for food, for culture, for biodiversity. But if your goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as fast as possible because we're in an emergency, this is a policy you might want to put in your back pocket for other reasons. So the other one was maximizing subsidizing energy, clean energy. What happens when we do that? And it only takes the temperature down 0.1 degrees. That's because we're not making polluters pay. A general, just making subsidizing clean energy does not do much because it does not make polluters pay. If we electrify transport, it barely does anything because it doesn't make polluters pay. If we electrify buildings and industry, same sort of thing. So yes, we can subsidize like to the max renewable energy, electrification, and buildings and industry, but it barely pulls down temperatures. Yes, it is important to do, but we need to be mindful that it barely pulls down emissions. And if the taxpayer is paying for that, that's pretty darn expensive for such a little amount of greenhouse gases. Now, lastly, let's just take a look at raising the carbon price as much as possible. And it goes down 0.9 degrees. Yes, we can still get to 1.5 C without it, but it's very difficult. And in Canada, at least for the consumer price, we get the money back. So we don't even pay. It's not a burden on the taxpayer. Okay. And Keith, you had a question?
So I was introduced to this about 2 months ago from a CCL presentation here in Canada, and I think it's a terrific scenario builder. I really applaud this being put together, and I think it'd be useful to is this my first question, is this related to Canada or is this globally?
This is globally, but you can go to the Pembina simulator and find that it's also very difficult to get to our Paris Agreement targets without a carbon price. If you've ever played with the Pembina simulator.
I haven't. I'm not sure that I have, but I guess we who work in climate advocacy in a number of locations are always interested in exploring multiple alternatives. So, for example, when you increased renewables, there was no corresponding decrease in coal or oil. So are we not supposed to have offsets like that?
What do you mean offsets? Like,
well,
no,
when
if
we increase
increase
renewable,
right?
are we not at the same time reducing one of the other sources, for example, coal, oil, or natural gas, at the same time we increase renewables?
That's a great question. And how does that, what's the mechanism?
Well, you reduce the status quo of the coal, oil, and or natural gas.
But how?
You lower it.
But the only way to do that is with a price, no? Like,
So for
Not
example,
all of it.
in Canada, if you increase renewables to the far right, and let's say you reduce natural gas, does that have an impact at the same time as you've increased renewables? Because it's natural gas.
okay. This is getting complex. I'm going to let James Collis tackle this one.
Yeah, just on the question of raising the price versus other things, I think it's helpful just to think about as all fossil fuels become more expensive because they have a price on them, what happens is all alternative forms of energy which do not have fossil fuel costs associated with them automatically become more competitive in the marketplace. And so what you have is a shift in competitiveness that begins to favor zero pollution options. And so people don't automatically swap to another fossil fuel based pollution. They swap to typically what is the cheapest. And therefore, by increasing the price over time, this effectively does eliminate fossil fuels. I just think that might be a more useful way of thinking about it than the total energy demand possibly doesn't go down very much. As the Europeans have found, driving energy efficiency can reduce emissions, but you still need people to swap to alternative sources. I think it's just helpful in terms of framing how it works.
I will put the Pembina simulator in there, and we will, and there you go, and you can explore it there. That was also the conclusion of the Pembina Institute. We only have 15 minutes left. So if there are any other questions that can be answered quickly, I would like to continue with the agenda, and I will stay afterwards for those who have pressing questions. So let's see who's asked questions. Neville and then Judy.
Yes, I just thought on that last point, I thought there was an alternative argument which says it's the growth argument, really, the economic growth argument that businesses, if they're furious on growing, and for growth, you require resources and energy. And it's a hungry beast, basically, and it has the potential to just go and find more places to grab resource and take all the available energy and more, and is always pulling for more. So I understand that as another counter argument to say, if all you do is keep providing renewable energy, then of course it will all get used, but so will all the coal, oil and gas, because the organizations using all that lot are desperate for growth when growth might not be the most ideal thing they ought to be trying for.
A lovely perspective and logical, and we need to look at this from all angles. Thank you. And Judy?
Hi, I just wanted to suggest the word demand. Raising the price reduces the demand. That's all.
Yep. No, that's really straightforward economics.
But only if you have an alternative. If there's no alternatives, there's nowhere else to go either. So there's a but there.
Yep. And the yes, and there are clean energy companies that really would love to see a stabilized carbon price so that they can attract investment. And Ed?
I use an analogy of fruit farming because I grew up on a fruit farm, and we had the apples growing on trees, and it's like money growing on trees. But it got to the point where the cost of delivering the apples, getting the apples from the tree to the customer, was more than the profit we'd made. So without that little price tweak, we would have just shed apples onto the market. But just with that price signal, it was enough for us to just let the apples rot on the trees. Very sad for us, but it's an analogy for if we make it a disincentive for people, even they've got reserves of oil and gas to flood the market with and get a few pennies profit, it just a small price signal will be enough for them to be disincentivized and just keep it in the ground.
Another excellent example. James, is that an old hand, or did you want to make one more point?
I did have another point, but I'm stuck thinking about fruit trees now.
Okay. Well,
the point around growth is that most of the legislation with a steady increasing carbon price built in feedback mechanisms such that if the greenhouse gas emissions reductions weren't achieved, the price would go up more steeply. And so there is a mechanism such that if growth is demanding more energy, then the incentive for cleaner options is accelerated. So if there are underlying reasons, whether it's growth or other issues that drives it, most of the legislation proposed includes a mechanism for increasing the incentive. That was it.
Fantastic. And that would be the consensus of about 4,500 US economists, including 28 Nobel Prize economists and another set of global economists, as well as the consensus of about 400 Canadian economists. So I need to continue, but we can loop back to this at the end. I do want to take a moment to introduce you to this web page that we are developing. So our volunteers around the world can find the information all in one place. If you go to our website at citizensclimate.org and put climate income into the Google search up in the right-hand corner, you will get to this page, and we are developing this page to give you resources to help you better understand. This is a total info bomb. I suggest you, print this up and read it over 2 or 3 days and start, doing your own research. But it does contain a lot of information, highly sourced, to help you discuss climate income and redirecting financial flows. And you're welcome to put comments and suggestions here if you wish for more ideas, but please, no wordsmithing. This will be an open source and living document for our volunteers. There's like some really good data in here to help you communicate this better. So, but the whole website, the whole web page itself will become like a resource. Video will live here, and we'll clean this up a little bit, and then you will have access to this evolving Laser Talks booklet. And the power of this Laser Talks booklet, I'm going to give you 2 things that happened so far this year in Canada. We presented at Queen's Park in Canada's largest province, and one of the provincial parliamentarians pulled us aside and said, "This laser talk on this subject is so excellent. I'd like for you to have a media scrum here at Queen's Park." So a week later, we went back and had a media scrum about a very particular aspect about climate policy in Canada. And again, another politician found another one of our laser talks. And today, in about 30 minutes, I'm speaking in the House of Commons. So really, I can only stay for about another 15, 20 minutes because I have to go to another Zoom call. So anyways, these laser talks are really important in helping with your advocacy. You can make them your own. You can translate them. You can suggest for more. And I really hope that you become in the habit of, learning these things. So now we're going to go into breakout rooms. Okay, so I do have to go to a House of Commons meeting at 3:30. I'm a nervous wreck. I've never presented to House of Commons before. It's kudos to the team that, does all this great research at Canada. We're so grateful for them. Okay, so yes, I will be awesome. Thanks, because I am not an expert. I am a messenger of expert information, and that takes a lot of the heat off. Okay, so any group have a question they really want to ask right now, you just jump in. Just especially if you haven't spoken yet. Really important to hear from those we haven't heard from. So which group would love to share their question?
How do you make carbon pricing palatable to the majority of people?
You just start one person at a time, Jan. You start with your own community and you just keep there's no magic button. You just have to have those face-to-face conversations. One thing I'd like to share actually is some mistakes that people make. And I think this is the best advice I ever got. It's so simple. If you really want to empower people and help save the planet and not be part of the cynicism and doomerism loop with your communications, the data is clear. People respond best to short stories, not the numbers that we all love, that follow this consistent pattern. You say the problem, You describe the pathway and the benefits. So the problem is fossil fuel companies have been lying for decades, and they also have been polluting for free. So the pathway is to make them pay, and the benefits will be we will be able to transition our economy with, you know, like that's a whole series of research. At least we know it works in Canada, and it's available on our website on how to be an effective climate communicator. And you can find all of this information here on this page. And as we get more and more data, we'll keep evolving this page. Great question, Jan. Thank you. And it's hard work convincing people about carbon pricing. But you know, at the end of the day, Jan, it doesn't matter if we get carbon pricing. What we really want is a livable world. Our stake in the ground is a carbon fee with rebates. But if somebody comes up with a policy that will reduce emissions and not put that pressure on the taxpayer to get us there, we'll support that too. And you know, as long as it, you know, doesn't leave anybody behind, doesn't, you know, overtly punish, you know, women, you know, so yeah, like, or poor people, we'll be behind it. We want, at the end of the day, we want a livable world. And our stake in the ground is just, this is the policy we think does it. But if you've got a policy just as good, we will cheer you on. We will stand behind you. But we have to see the policy and we have to see the data. Jennifer.
Like a question.
Oh, okay, Andre, go ahead.
It's a question. The simulator doesn't include the options that are more and more developed also about drown down and carbon capture and similar.
Yeah, it has carbon capture. You can do technological removals. So you have to click on here, and then you can really start to like dig into it. Andre, just like Citizens Climate Lobby, I highly recommend going and getting the On-Roads simulator training. It's free. Staying with Climate Reality, there are so many amazing training programs. I'm not a full ambassador for On-Roads. I've never done all the exams that would give me that. So I'm more of just somebody who introduces you to it. But yes, you can look.
Thank you. You can do it.
You
can use it. Thank you.
The data is not that great for CCS. I mean, we do need it, but it's not going to allow us to keep expanding the fossil fuel industry at the same time. And it's very expensive. And the most important thing about CCS, that a fossil fuel lobbyist told me at COP28 in Dubai, that we can't use carbon capture and sequestration. It's not economically viable until we have a carbon price at about $150 to $180 a ton. So even if they want it to work, they've got to crank that price up. So yeah, okay. But that's technical. Great question though. Other questions?
Jennifer has.
Yeah, please, Jennifer. Sorry I missed you.
That's all right. I was wondering, how do you show the impact of the carbon pricing via the Pembina simulator? I can't figure it out. I gave it a shot, but I can't do it.
Oh, okay. Let me see. I put it in the chat. Jennifer, you email me. That's way too specific, and that I'd have to go and remember how to do it because somebody did it for me to show me.
No worries.
Okay, so again, I'm not an expert and I would have to go, hey, how'd you do that? So
no problem. Sure, I'll email
okay,
you.
great question.
Thanks.
Keith.
So, hi, folks. Distributed energy in local communities is something that has been maybe more applicable in remote areas, acknowledged. And the Just Transition Guide that's come out with 300 examples of how those types of things have been applied across Canada in more remote areas is a great resource for us. I think we need to look at things more regionally than in entire countries. I think that would really help. If we could take On-Roads and figure it out for Ontario and BC, and Quebec, which are the major population centers, apply it locally, that would be really terrific. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, the Pembina Institute, the simulator could really help you with that. We are an international organization that works really closely with our global South friends, and we do take a global look. And if we don't tackle this globally and see the interconnectedness of it all, it's going to be hard. So yes, we need to do regionally. Absolutely, we need to do everything, everywhere, all at once. Sorry to say, that's the way the world works.
Right, and sorry, just to compliment you on bringing us together for that. I only am concerned about India, who has announced tripling the amount of coal-fired units in the next 10 years. So I'm just not sure that India's data is up to date and whether they'll achieve anything there, because latest, anyway. But globally, yes, absolutely. But locally, how to apply it and how to get solutions on the ground, that's a great starting point. Thank you.
Yeah, we love the people that do that work. And I'm a huge fan of district energy. And I live in a community that built the first geothermal district heating unit in 2009. And I got a tour of that in 2009. I mean, it is so exciting what we can do. And it's too bad that the fossil fuel companies have pretty much got our politicians captured here in Ontario, at least, and many parts of Canada. Because the provincial governments are the one that control that file, not the feds. Okay. Okay. Any last questions? This has been fantastic. For our regular volunteers, if you want to ever present this again, we can work together. Like if you want to do it in your own language, your mother tongue, we can do that. I can give you access to the Kahoot, because I thought the Kahoot was a hoot personally, and and you can also take the slides and give it about 3 to 4 weeks for us to just massage those laser talks a little bit more before you start translating them into your own language. And as a volunteer, please also feel free to suggest other laser talks that you would like to see in that booklet. And let's keep evolving that page. And thank you, everyone. And please send me some love, because I'm getting really nervous to speak in front of the House of Commons in 25 minutes. Thank you. Yes, bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Break a leg.
Break.
Got this.